Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Now, I've been developing this course called A Year to Excellence, and what I'm doing is breaking down these critical skills for salespeople. And one that almost always comes to the top whenever I talk to a great salesperson or a manager who identifies what great salespeople are is listening. Yes, it's part of empathy. It's part of curiosity. And you really can't be a great salesperson if you're not a great listener. But to become a great listener, we have to consciously do something. It's not just hearing the words. What we want to do is find out the meaning behind the words. And today I have an author of a book called Deep Listening, sorry. That's a different course. And we're going to talk about listening, how he got interested in it, the value that he's gotten from it, the process he takes his clients through. And I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. He gives lots of great examples. He's very open with the structure and the process of the book. He gifted me the book. I've gone through it. It's really powerful. It's a different type of book. It has cards with it. It has examples. And it's just a great skill to develop as a salesperson. And you can say, well, I am a good listener. We can't be perfect listeners. It's a lot like therapy. When we're talking with our customer, too often we're trying to become understood instead of understanding. Everyone wants to be understood. All communication is about being understood. And all we have is our words, our gestures. And the recipient of those words and gestures has to interpret what the person means. So that's what listening's all about. We're going to get deep into it in this episode. It's a little bit longer than most, just a few minutes more. But I hope you really enjoy it. It's one of those I think you should listen to more than once and just mark it, download it, save it wherever you can, because it's something you really got to practice before you go into a sales call. Evaluate yourself after the sales call and develop it day in and day out. And it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. I've never found the perfect listener. And even after this interview, Oscar asked for feedback. I thought that was so great. I'd say probably less than 1% of the people I interview ask for feedback. But before we get into it, I want to thank everybody for a great 2018. The listeners have really made the podcast blow up. It's been insanely successful. I am so grateful for all the things that you do, reviews, sharing it with a friend, going on LinkedIn, hitting a little like on one of my videos. I'm putting them up pretty much daily now, kind of the walk and talk type videos, summarizing some really ideas that I have, observations, tips, tricks, just really things I see about sales today that I think reps and managers will be interested in. I also put them on YouTube. If you prefer YouTube, it's Brian Burns on YouTube. Just search Brian Burns with an I and sales. It'll come right up. You'll see it there if you're a YouTuber. And before we get into this, I want to thank my friends over at Co-Video. Co-Video has made a big part of this year. Video emails is the way to go. Everybody in the courses that converts and tries video email, it's super simple. And once you get over the first 3 to 5, that camera shyness, you really connect with people, and especially at this time of the year where you want to, just say hi. You want to say thank you. You want to say, hey, looking forward to working with you in 2019. You want to connect with them. And text just doesn't convey that. It just doesn't. Also, my friends at Pipedrive, the product is insanely good. It's enterprise quality now. So if you're looking to, get a CRM that's really usable, that's auto-populated, that's integrated with your email system, that people will use, I use it. And trust me, I've tried, so many CRMs. It's just a nightmare out there. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. And I really appreciate everybody. Say hi on LinkedIn for me, will you, this week? I'd like to hear from you. Hey, Oscar, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
G'day, Brian. A little different. It's early morning here in Australia, so a different part of the world from most of the guests you're used to dealing with. A 30-year career in technology and telecommunications, the vast majority of that in B2B scenarios as a CMO and as somebody who's been a salesperson and led a sales team. For the last 5 years, I've had the privilege of working as a leadership coach, working with chief marketing officers, chief information officers, chief operating officers, and CEOs around how they can listen better to their organization, their customers, their marketplace, their competitors, so they can make a bigger impact. So that's where I'm at right now.
Now, how did you evolve to that? Was there a catalyst for you to start your own company? Obviously, there's a gaping need for this capability. I talk to great salespeople and leaders all the time, and listening, it's all wrapped up in empathy, right? It's all very closely curiosity, listening, empathy. It's all about getting out of your head and getting into their head. How did you get interested in it?
It wasn't a lightning bolt moment for me. There was a series of events along the way. It even started before I was in the workplace. I went to a school with 23 nationalities. A lot of them were coming from war-torn parts of Southeast Asia at the end of the Vietnam War, but also from military dictatorships in South America and fleeing Eastern Europe at the time of the USSR. So I guess I'm dating myself here. And I was always the connector between those where English was their first language and English wasn't. I was a connector between the teachers and the students. I was a connector between the jocks and the nerds. And it's because I learned later on, I wasn't only hearing what they were saying, but I was watching how they were saying it as well. Moving into the workplace, there was a number of episodes where I was renowned for never struggling to hire people. And one of the things I always asked people was, tell me about the last time you spoke to a customer and what did they say in terms of their problems and what do we need to change as a company as a result? In sales roles, that's really obvious, but in marketing roles, marketing people rarely actually speak to a customer. So I brought all the marketing and leadership teams I ever worked with into the call center. So working with Vodafone and Microsoft, you have this vast customer base, everything from large organizations, multinationals and global organizations, right down to sole traders and then consumers as well. I always briefed my advertising agencies with real customers in the room, and that was a shock for them because they were always used to getting market research, PowerPoints and slides and graphs and data. And oftentimes, executives don't know customers. They know rows in spreadsheets. They don't know what customers say. They have these things called verbatims that they work off. So I was really good at helping people to listen there. I didn't know that at the time. It would evolve again, where I had to get quite frustrated as one of the leaders sponsoring the graduate recruitment program at Microsoft. We weren't getting the kind of talent we needed, and I rebuilt the graduate program just by listening to people who didn't join Microsoft as graduates but got made offers. And the graduates who joined Microsoft but left really quickly, usually to go and join a competitor or a large consulting organization like a Bain or a McKinsey. And in listening to that, that program got taken to 26 Microsoft subsidiaries around the world. And my local managing director in Australia said, that's really your calling. That's what you're great at. That's what you're passionate about. And that's the tipping point to moving to the journey about how to listen. So my mentor set me a challenge 2 years into my business. What's a goal that would scare you, Oscar? And I said, well, Dermot, I want to train 1 million listeners before I leave this planet. And he says, but you can do that, can't you? And I said, I can see it. It's possible. He says, if you can achieve it in your lifetime, it's not ambitious enough. What would scare you? And I said, He said, would 10 million scare you? I said, yeah, it would. He said, come back next month, tell me what you think. Anyway, next month I came back and I said, you know what? Although 10 million scares me, my quest is to create 100 million deep listeners in the world before I leave the planet. And that's what brought me to today.
That's what excites you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is deep listening a particular scientific approach, or is it your approach, or is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, I was actually asked this question about 3 months ago by somebody in the Netherlands who read my book and said, "Wow, your stuff's so practical. What's the academic underpinning of it?" And I've done it. I said to them, I said, "Corinne, I've done a lot of literature review in understanding where my framework does or doesn't fit. But deep listening is 5 levels of listening. Most of us see in color, but we listen in black and white. We listen in this monochrome, 2-dimensional view of the world, which is about hearing and seeing." And my work, as I said to Corinne, was my work is a function of what works for the client. So the academic underpinning of it is relatively minimal. But 6 months ago, to start getting evidence, I have a survey panel of 1,410 people who I've been working with and will work with over a 3-year period to either prove or disprove my hypothesis that if you listen at 5 levels of listening, you can make an impact beyond words. You can stop missing opportunities in your customer base because you're not listening to what's unsaid rather than just listening to what's said. You can grow faster than the competition because when you listen to a customer, they're usually loyal and usually more likely to refer you, and you're more likely to solve bigger problems for them. And as a consequence, the revenues you can get out of that organization are more significant as well.
Because it's really an innate desire that we all be heard, and I guess comprehended and understood. And certainly as individuals, coworkers, and especially with customers.
Yeah, I say it's your birthright. At 20 weeks in your mother's womb, you can already distinguish your mother's voice from any other voice. And at 32 weeks, you can distinguish Beethoven from Bon Jovi. So listening is the very, very first thing you learn. Ironically, it's also the last sense you lose when you leave the planet. But the minute we're born, we come into the world, we're kicking and screaming, and we want to be noticed by speaking. And we spent the 20th century all being taught how to speak better. And I think the productivity hack of the 21st century is learning how to listen better, because at a minimum, on average, the average human spends 55% of their day listening. In sales roles, it's 70%. In executive roles, it's up to 86% of their day is spent listening. Yet only 2% of people know how. And listening's really hard because no one's ever taught us how. We don't know the basics. In maths, we know plus and minus and division and subtraction, but we don't know the equivalent for listening. So, helping people understand those 5 levels of listening will make a really, really big difference.
Let's go through that. Maybe if you could walk us through that and explain why it's so important.
Yeah, let's go on a speed date with the 5 levels of listening. Level 1 is not about listening to the speaker. That's where most literature starts and finishes. Focus on the speaker, paraphrase, nod, be an active listener. Level 1, listen to yourself. This is where most people actually fail because their foundations aren't in place. It's impossible to listen to somebody else if you've got the last conversation still playing in your head, or you've got the next conversation playing in your head, or you've got a story about where's the code word so I can sell them a product. The minute they say that code word, I'm going to jump in, and you're not actually listening to the other person. So level 1, listen to yourself. Be completely open, available to listen to them. The easiest hack for anybody to do in a sales role with this is switch off your phone, move away, the laptop, the iPad, whatever device is getting in between you and them. I remember a conversation visiting Microsoft exec. He ran an organization of 55,000 people. He came to Australia off an 18-hour flight from Seattle to Sydney. He sat in a room with 10 CEOs that I was hosting locally. And just as he was about to sit down, he said to the room, he says, "Look, forgive me. I just have to switch off my cell phone." It was a piece of beautiful theatre. He stood up, he put his cell phone in his hand, he switched it off, he then went and put it in his bag in the corner. Brian, what do you think happened for the rest of the room?
They all did the same thing?
Yeah, 7 out of 10 people switched off their phone. And what Peter said in that moment is the most important thing I can offer this room right now is my attention. You have it completely. The impact of that meeting was completely transformational. Now, because he was being hosted by other peers of mine for the next 2 days, I knew this piece of theatre would play out, but it was a very deliberate sign. Rather than him saying, hey, I've travelled all this way around the world, what I've got to say will matter for you. Yeah. He just role modeled great listening. And when I talk to my executives about the frustrations they find with staff members not listening, I say, what are you role modeling when it comes to listening? That simple thing is really transformational. Let's finish up with the other 4 levels of listening. Listening at level 2 is listening to the content. That's audio. That's what they say. It's also visual. It's what you see in terms of body language. But there's a third layer here. It's feeling their energy and making sure that you understand, although their body language might be aligned, although what they say may be aligned to their words, is the energy slightly differently. And a lot of times people that aren't buying from us will do a great job of saying the right things, of showing us the right body language, but something just doesn't feel right. There are more nerve endings in your gut than there are in your brain. So as sales professionals, trust your gut when you're feeling that something's not quite right, where you're getting different energy. And if you're listening at that level, you'll definitely make a bigger impact on growing your pipeline. Level 3, advanced salespeople do this. Listening for the context. What patterns do they speak with? Do they speak in positives or negatives? Do they talk about themselves individually, or do they talk about them and their teams? Do they talk about their teams and the system? Do they talk internally or externally? Do they talk about the marketplace, the regulator, the competitors, or do they just talk about inside the organization? A lot of times, if you're listening for these patterns, you'll understand how to communicate back to them really, really well. At this level, I often say, this is where most people make the biggest mistake as sales professionals. A sales professional's job is not to listen to the customer. It's not even to solve the customer's problem. Great sales professionals solve their customers' problems, and in doing so, help their customers grow revenue. So for this, a lot of it's helping to understand what's the problem set that organization that you're selling into and the customers they're dealing with. What are those problems? Level 4 is the ninja move of listening. It's going to sound a bit Yoda-esque, but you need to learn to listen to what's not said. All of us know, Brian, you know this, it's happened to you. You have the meeting, you walk to the lift, the elevator, the escalator, or out the front door, and in those 20 steps, they say to you, hey, Brian, I forgot to tell you something.
Yeah, yeah, the real issue.
Yeah, that's where unsaid is discussed. If you're in a 45-minute meeting, ask at the 30-minute mark, hey, we've covered off a lot right now. Is there anything we would say to ourselves in a year's time we should be having a good long listen to? Is there anything we haven't discussed that the chairman, that the CEO, that the customers, that a regulator might think we need to discuss? And if you can do that in the meeting, you help create a really powerful experience for the customer, particularly if it's a group selling scenario, which these days B2B is always a group selling scenario. And I heard some great stats that you're going to have to convince at least 12 people in any kind of enterprise, over 1,000 people, about a solution when it comes to B2B selling. So if you can bring the unsaid into the actual meeting, you're going to start to unpick faster the real problems. What they start to tell you then is the political landscape. They start to tell you where the blocks are in the buying process. They start to tell you the competing priorities against you, because oftentimes as sales professionals, we may win the opportunity, but we don't win the business case because we're competing against things we don't even know exist. So a really good question to unpick the unsaid. Hey, do you have a program management office in your organization, or do you have an evaluation board that looks at all procurement processes? How would we stack up against those? And that becomes a much more powerful discussion. The other part of unsaid is your job is not to sell the person in front of you. Your job is to help them sell your business case internally. And for a lot of salespeople, that's the missing formula for them to make a bigger impact. Last level is listening for meaning. Listening for meaning is the impact beyond words. I was speaking about 6 months ago to a manufacturing organization, and I could just feel in the room there was this tension. Brian, have you ever walked into an organization and it's got that feel?
Oh, yeah. A few too many times.
You can literally walk into reception when you sign in to the building and you can just feel something in the way, the culture of the Anyway, there was something not right, as I said earlier on. And while I was, it was a group of all the people managers on this manufacturing site. And I just said, hey, I'm really curious. Just quickly turn to the person next to you. What sort of movie is playing out right now in this manufacturing location? And it was lots of hubbub, and I had the CEO to my left-hand side, so I went over to him and I said, what do you think they'll say? He goes, I've got no idea. I said, there's an interesting vibe in this room. Can you feel it? And he went, no. And I went, okay, that's cool. So we come back and I say, hey, throw some movie names at me. And the movie names were Towering and Inferno, Titanic. They were all Bruce Willis, Die Hard. They were all disaster movies. And it gave them the opportunity when I said, what kind of movie is this, to create their own meaning. They would never say to their boss in a million years that what was happening on that site was a disaster. What had happened was there was an infiltration into one of the pipes of an impurity, and it's a medical system, so they have to be precise. And as a result, a whole bunch of medication was being held up. So the leader came up on stage, took my microphone, and said something really powerful. He said, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I've obviously got this wrong and I need some help. How do we make this disaster movie into something that you're actually going to enjoy?" And from that point on, the truth started to come out in the room. So in a lot of selling scenarios, you can ask, how would you describe the culture of this organization? Is it a bird? Is it an animal? Is it a fast animal? Is it a slow animal? How would you describe the process that procurement goes through? Is it the Spanish Inquisition, or is it a
reality show?
Or does it feel like Shark Tank? And if you can get that kind of meaning behind it, you can find ways that all of a sudden it becomes something that selling isn't something you do to them, it's something you do with them because they feel like you're solving their problems.
So how do we become better listeners? I mean, I think first understanding the 5 stages is good, but we've been kind of conditioned as sales reps to be talking instead of listening. I think, even probably 20, 30 years ago, questioning-based selling became very powerful. And, people become reasonably good at it, but nobody teaches this. Except for you.
Look, I would say here's 3 really practical things to start off with. Number 1, get rid of the distraction. That cell phone is programmed to distract you. It's no coincidence that the software industry is using psychology and software techniques from the slot machine industry to make sure you're completely distracted. So just switch it off, get it out of the way. At a minimum, you'll differentiate yourself from any other rep in the room. Number 2, in 1993 in Canada, and this has been replicated in other research in Europe and in the US, the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. There's a technique called box breathing. It means breathe in, hold for 5 seconds, breathe across, hold for 5 seconds, and breathe up, hold for 5 seconds. This is a technique used by the Navy SEALs, by military snipers, by Olympic athletes, by opera singers. It's a technique that high-performance people use to get into state so they can be completely present for the performance they're in. Now, the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen is a function of just getting brain to the oxygen to the brain faster. If you can get oxygen to the brain faster, the brain will perform better. Because we haven't been taught how to listen, cognitively, it's really tough to listen because we don't know how. It would be like going into a gym and simultaneously going on a treadmill while holding barbells and a skipping rope. That's just impossible to do, yet in listening, that's what we do. So an oxygenated brain is a listening brain, and lastly, a hydrated brain is a listening brain as well. For a lot of us, we kick off our day with coffee, and I'm not going to judge that, but that's not hydration. If you're ever having a meeting, always ask for a glass of water. At a minimum, you get to walk around and get into the kitchen, or you get to have a conversation with someone else who might bring in a glass of water. The brain consumes 25% of the blood sugars of the body. If we can get blood sugars to the brain faster and keep them there, your ability to listen will go up dramatically. So they're the 3 practical tips. Here's a really simple framework though, Brian, that if you remember this, everything becomes easy. If you want to take one thing out of today's conversation, you can forget everything I've said up until now. Just listen to this. It's the 125-400 rule. You speak at between 125 words to 150 words a minute, yet you can listen to 400 words a minute. Genetically, you're programmed to be distracted. Neurologically, you fill in the gap with 300 words. That's your problem. For the speaker, it's even worse. They speak at 125 words a minute, and yet they can think at 900 words a minute. So there's a 1 in 9 chance that the first thing that comes out of their mouth is a clear articulation of what they're thinking. So Brian, I don't know about you, but if you had an 11% chance of surviving a surgery, you'd probably get a second opinion.
Yeah, 11% chance of the plane landing. Yeah, you wouldn't get on it.
Yeah, so the trick is in knowing that the first thing out of their mouth is only part of what they're thinking. The 125-400 rule simply says, ask them another question that's got nothing to do with what you're talking about. And these questions might be something as simple as, I'm curious what else you're thinking about that. And often they'll pause and they go, yeah, you know what? You know what I haven't told you? You know what really matters? You know what's really important? You know what's going to make the difference? You know what's going to make this really successful? These are all code words that people are tapping into what matters to them, where the meaning is. So just get comfortable with the pause. Silence needs to be treated like another word. It needs to be listened to fully and completely. And if you can do that, if you can just listen and ask one more question that's got nothing to do about the content or the advance you're trying to get in the meeting, just simply ask them, what else have you been thinking about that? Another powerful question would be, how long have you been thinking about that? Or how long has this organization been exploring this? And this will provide a great way for them to go through in their head and tell you what they've gone through. But I will tell you 9 times out of 10, they'll say, you know what? We're falling into the same trap again, aren't we? And you haven't said anything. They've all said it themselves. And then they tell you the trap they've fallen into. They don't do a good business case, or they don't consult with engineering, or they haven't got finance in the process, or they haven't thought about the competitive angle. All these things pop up when you simply ask questions that aren't about the content. So remember the 125-400 rule. They speak at 125 words a minute. You listen at 400. So if you can ask 3 more questions, you won't get bored. You won't zone out. You'll stay in the moment, and every conversation will be really exciting and worth listening to.
And do you prepare your questions when you go to meet a client?
Absolutely not.
No?
No.
Tell me why.
it's not about me.
Okay.
It's all about them. So do I have a process? Yeah, sure. I'm listening through the 5 levels of listening,
Okay.
but all of my questions are often not even about their content. It's typically about their context. If they can understand their context, they'll sell themselves. For me, when I go in to see a potential client, I'm merely making an invitation and saying, look, I sense this is your problem. I sense this is the problem your customers are struggling with. I would approach it this way. If you'd like to work together, great. If not, 9 times out of 10, I'm actually qualifying out pretty quickly. And I'll say, look, I know an expert in that field who's much better at it than me. I think it would be better for me to make an introduction to you. But because I'm not worried about what I'm selling and I'm deeply, deeply immersed in their problem and their customers' problems, and in public sector, it's what's the problem for the citizens, the voters, the various secretaries of various departments that I'm listening through for them. What it changes is people say to me, wow, that meeting went really quick. You got to the point really quickly. I didn't get to the point really quickly. They did, because I gave them a chance to go and explore what they haven't said. So I definitely don't have a script. And I'm definitely not saying that that's going to be productive for you that's listening as well. I'm sure most organizations that are selling in complex B2B scenarios have a process that they have to go through. All I would ask you is, within your script, try and explore a little bit further what they haven't said, and you'll be really pleasantly surprised what happens to the speed of your opportunity close.
And when you're engaged with a client and they're talking, what are you thinking?
Right then,
Yeah.
I would be going, I'm looking at them.
Yeah.
I'm feeling their energy. I'm noticing the patterns in how they're speaking. I'm noticing also not just what they're saying, but I'm going up. I'm literally visualizing myself above the conversation and asking myself this question: is this productive for them right now, or are they stuck? So I'm not only trying to listen to them, I'm trying to see the progress of the conversation. So the conversation itself is this abstract concept that sits between the two of us. Think of it as a table tennis match. You know, for a lot of us, we're hitting the ball back really fast. For me, I'm really slow. I'm very deliberate. I'm giving them as much space as possible in line with where their patterns are at. So I'm making sure, so I'll check in quite often, and at the 20-minute mark, this is a common question I ask: Brian, are you getting what you need from today? And for what we've got remaining, what would be the best way to use our time? Now, quite often what they'll say is, you know what, Oscar, I've realized we should pause this meeting because I've got some work to do. Can we come back in 2 weeks' time because I've got to go and talk to procurement, finance, whatever the case might be? Or they might go, you know what, can you just wait 5 minutes? I need to bring somebody into this meeting because their opinion's going to make a difference. Or can you just hang on a sec, Oscar, to make the rest of this meeting productive, I need to bring up a document and show you that. And you're creating a framework for them to use their time really productively. So quite often, as a selling professional, we kind of have this orientation that the selling process is what we're the champion of for them. Because a lot of time people talk about the buyer's journey, but very few times have we met buyers who know what their buyer's journey is, right?
That's one of my themes, yeah.
Yeah, but nothing frustrates a seller more than a buyer who goes, oh, yeah, let's bring in procurement now, and it's way too early or it's way too late, or let's bring in legal, let's bring in compliance, or finance needs to build a business case. You know, would have been a cracking idea to do that, you know, right at the beginning of the process. So quite often the literature around the buyer's journey frustrates the heck out of me, because we might have a playbook, but the customer surely doesn't.
No.
You know, they have to be pretty advanced buyers to know what their buyer's journey actually is. So, you know, in that moment, in the meeting, if you can be the champion of making that time super efficient, what I know I'm very deliberate about. I don't have 1 hour meetings. I always offer them 2 choices, 45 or 20. And I'm signaling to them that I value their time as an executive, and that I know that's a currency they trade in, because a lot of these people don't even have time for bathroom breaks. They literally have to have it scheduled into their calendar. So if you can respect their time and in that meeting, show them reverence around time and go, hey, right now we're halfway. What's going to be the most productive thing? It's a great trust signal that you're building with them beyond rapport.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed your book. Is there any particular way that you'd recommend people utilize it?
It's quite funny because I get people sending me photos from all around the world on this book. I've had a lady send me a photo of her reading it on the banks of a river in Germany. I've had plenty of salespeople sending me from hotel rooms. They're the classic road warrior. And I think the one thing that I would say, go and explore in the book, is the 4 villains of listening, because your prospects and your customers will tend to fall into one of the 4 villains. They're either a lost listener, they have no idea what's going on, they don't even know why they should be in the meeting. You've got the interrupting listener. The interrupting listener can't wait for you to draw in breath, because that's their commercial break to come in and tell you whatever they need to. You've got the shrewd listener. And unfortunately, in most salespeople, the shrewd listener is the most obvious villain of listening. The shrewd listener is listening and going, oh, you think that's your problem. Once I've solved that, you're going to have 3 other problems that you don't even know you have. And while you're trying to solve their problems, you're not listening to them. And the 4th listener is the dramatic listener. The dramatic listener loves any conversation, because that's a theatre set for them to tell you how much drama is going on in their life. So if you tell them you had a tough boss once, they're going to tell you why their boss is even harder, why this organisation is so much more political than any organisation you've ever been part of. And they're not really interested in the conversation. They're just interested in being the centre of attention and all that drama as well. And in the book, we go through the 4 superheroes of listening as well. What do you need to role model yourself and to them to make an impact beyond words?
Hey, this has been a great conversation, Oscar. Where do people go to get the book, connect up with you, and learn more about your work?
Yeah, the book's easy. You can visit Amazon.com, or if you'd like a signed hard copy, just visit OscarTrimboli.com. There's only one, or you can punch Oscar Trimboli into your search engine, and that'll land on the website, and you'll see the podcast and the books where we interview experts in listening, and you can learn from people beyond me on how to have an impact beyond words. Brian, thanks for helping me on a quest to 100 million deep listeners in the world.
Hey, I hope you like that. Oscar's a great guy. Let's go through those 5 stages of listening, because so many of us get stuck really on stage 1 and 2, thinking about ourselves, positioning ourselves. Then we hear the content, the words, the images, the facial gestures, but do we really understand what they mean? Do we put them into level 3, the number of the context itself? And then level 4, what is not being said. And that is the critical part in sales. And this comes into my divide and concur approach, in that people don't share the non-said stuff in front of other people. It's that walk to the car. It's that one-on-one conversation. It's that face-to-face time that is so critical, that is so not around today as much as it used to be. And then the level 5, the real meaning, the why behind the why, or the 3rd level of why. Think about, why you bought a car. Everyone will say, oh, I like it, been looking forward to it. And then they come up with the stats. Oh, it's very reliable. It's very safe. It's got great resale value. And then you ask the 3rd, well, yeah, but really, why'd you buy the car? Because I feel on top of the world. It's like, ever since I was a kid, I wanted this car. That's the level we need to get to as salespeople, because if we're communicating what we do and how it works, that's a commodity. That's a thing. We have to connect with people at the level that they are really going to make a decision. If you stay at the commodity level, that's a if and when and why you decision. It's not a now must-have decision. We've got to get to the must-have. Otherwise, it tends to just slip, deprioritize, go away. Now, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I'm going to be doing a lot of these types of interviews, kind of around the sales skills, not just the strategy, not just best practices in 2019. Please let me know what you'd like to see more of. I've got a couple of other podcasts that you may want to be checking out. Sales questions. It's really just, I get tons of questions during the week, and that's how I respond to them so that I can really answer people's questions and not be rude, but also share it among the community. So sales questions, just search your podcast player for that. And if you're in the leadership, you want to get into leadership issues, or you just like leadership issues, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast is out there, where I interview typically managers and people who work with managers on the leadership part of sales and marketing, on revenue generation. I think it's the least understood and the most important part of a business. This podcast, as you can tell, is pretty much about individual contributor selling skills, strategies, and styles that I see working today. Please check out my website, b2brevenue.com. You can schedule a call to talk about the training, nothing else but the training. So please be respectful of my time there, and please show up if you do schedule it. Also, I get my free ebook there on how companies make product selections. Nobody talks about this, and everybody needs to know it. Everyone thinks they know their buyer's journey, and we and Oscar shared that a little bit in this conversation. Also, make sure you're checking out nudge.ai. They have the coupon code Brutal Truth. You got 1 month free. Try it out. Look at how you can use AI to get your full total addressable market. Get an email every morning. Find out how you're connected up. Get your team on it if you're a manager. This is really relationships, word of mouth. Everybody I talk to, it comes down to that. The typical spamming, marketing stuff it's not working as well. And I heard one of these outreach type SDR companies on a podcast, and even they are admitting it doesn't work anymore, or the effectiveness has dwindled to the point where it isn't economically feasible anymore. And that's why I came up with Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting, because we have to go back to being human beings. Technology has burnt the land. Last year, email kind of jumped the shark. This year, kind of these cadences, multi-channel has jumped the shark. People are just shutting down. And what ends up working? What's worked for centuries. Word of mouth, connections, but you can do it at scale. That's what I do. You can use AI. You can use natural human activity and take a certain sequence that has been psychologically proven to work over the years, and the people in the course are just getting insane results. So make sure you're checking that out. Also, I interviewed the Gong CEO over on the B2B Revenue Leadership Show. You might want to check that out. I've been using Gong on my interviews. It's helping me out quite a bit. If you are looking for that talk-to-listen ratio, deep listening, and you want a way to do it automatically, there you go. You got a little product for that now. Appreciate everybody listening. We'll see you next time. And if you're on LinkedIn and you see some of my stuff go by, give it a little thumbs up, give it a little comment, say you're a podcast listener. And anything I can do for you, just let me know. Appreciate all your help and support in 2018. I'm getting so psyched for 2019. Got big plans, staffing up over here at the Brutal Truth headquarters, and we'll see you then. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. And I really would appreciate everybody who goes onto LinkedIn, connects up with me, or follows me there. If you happen to see some of my content flying by, if you could throw a little thumbs up or a comment or a share, I definitely appreciate it. It helps spread the word about the podcast. And make sure you're checking out my website, b2brevenue.com. You can get my free book on how companies make product selections. It's a real book. It is on Amazon, but I give it away for free. Just register there. It'll email you a link to it, and you can just download the PDF from there. Also, if you want to check out the courses, start the conversation, get the meeting, or closing the complex sale, and you have more questions about it, the short answer is there are video courses. You get access for a year, but it's also a community. What does that mean? You can ask questions anytime via voicemail or email. I answer them within a week, put them into the course. We have office hours every other week. It's an hour long course where you can basically, I pick a topic, answer questions, you can ask questions. Also, you can schedule one-on-ones for free, and we just talk through your particular use case, and that gets shared with the course. So if you don't have time for office hours or the timing doesn't work, or you just want some more one-on-one help, that's all included for a whole year. So it's really a year to go from where you are to where you want to be. And so it's not just videos, it's not just knowledge, it's practice, it's getting feedback. You can send me emails, you can send me your presentation. I'll help you with anything that you need to close the complex sale or get the meeting. And you can check out them at b2brevenue.com. So that's it. I really appreciate it. And please tell somebody about the podcast and let me know if I can help you in any way. Oh, and you want to hear some results from the course? Well, here you go.
You know, I love the approach. It's working for me just fantastic. If I sent you some of the emails, which I should, the conversations that I'm having with people, I think you'd be blown away because they're not really about work. Yeah. I've figured out if you can kind of get personal with them, like one lady, it's all about her family, kids. And then I sprinkled in a little bit around work, and she's LinkedIn, sending me messages on LinkedIn, photos of her family. No, I'm not even kidding. I should show this to you. You'd be stunned. I was shocked. And we're going to lunch on September 6th. And yesterday she shot me a LinkedIn message and said, "Hey, Ron, why don't we get on the phone and do a video call beforehand so our lunch isn't so awkward? We're like barely not meeting each other for the first time." Oh, holy cow, right? Like, this is unbelievable. So this is not the first time that this has happened. She's kind of an extreme, but I'm starting to figure out a pattern where I can actually make this a process, you know? So good. Yeah. I'll show you that. So it's getting to that point, and every time I do this, I'm like, God, this is unbelievable, you know? So,
and it feels better too, doesn't it?
Oh, Brian, let me tell you something. To be able to go to lunch with her, I'll even talk to her on the phone, right? We're going to talk about family, kids, work-life harmony, because I shared a thing with her from Bezos about work-life harmony. This is where the conversation will start. Now, at some point, we're both not stupid, right? We know we're going to talk about work. We know why we're both there. Right. But to kick it off this way is so much better. And to end that lunch with the last 5 to 8 minutes of telling, well, what are you guys doing with digital